Hello, my name is Matt Reardon, and thanks for watching this June 28th West Weather Update on Wednesday evening, brought to you by Nutrien Ag Solutions. To start here, we're just looking at a 500 millibar height map across the United States, and this is really just to give us a clue as to where are the troughs, which tend to bring about cooler weather, and where are the ridges. And I think quickly we can identify a trough here across California and Nevada. And if I just kind of trace these lines here, you notice they're more in a U shape. That's a trough. That tends to bring cooler weather in. So not a surprise that we're cooler today, parts of California and Nevada. But as I take this through the forecast, you're going to notice a quick shift. And it's not 3, 4, or 5 days out. It's almost immediate in the next 24 to 48 hours. And I'll take this through tonight here on Wednesday evening. And as we go into Thursday, through Thursday evening, now into Friday, well, that trough is now quickly shifted. It's actually weakened and moved over California, or I should say Colorado, into the central U.S. And in California, we have a ridge now developing in. In fact, if we can kind of draw around this ridge here, more of a mountain in the flow, if you will. That signifies an upper level ridge. And I'll tell you, as meteorologists, excuse me, we look for these upper level ridges to bring in warmer temperatures. They tend to keep rain away, all else equal. And so not a surprise that a lot of the temperatures for California, parts of Arizona, Nevada, even getting in, certainly to Oregon, are shifting warmer for this weekend and a bit beyond that as well. We'll break down the specifics of that in just a bit here. I think an easier way to visualize this is looking at the same kind of 500 millibar height contours, but with that anomaly overlaid. And that gives us a better clue as to where those troughs and those ridges are hanging out. So there's that trough over California and Nevada and Utah. That quickly shifts this evening. So take this forecast into Thursday, into Friday. Well, now it's a lot more obvious where we're dealing with that ridge and potentially warmer temperatures over California, over Oregon, perhaps Idaho and Nevada as well, centered underneath that developing ridge there. And just for fun, we'll take this all the way out into Monday of next week, into Tuesday and Wednesday. Still seeing some ridging now over parts of Washington and Oregon, but we've started to weaken it a bit over Nevada and California. That could be relevant for that kind of next week. I'll call it the mid next week beyond forecast. We'll cover that in just a second, but I wanted to take that forecast out the entire 7 days. As far as the National Weather Service is concerned, this is their all hazards map. If we just look across this map, certainly for the western region, but even the south central region, I don't even have to show the legend on the right. I mean, it just looks warm based on some of these advisories that are out here. And that is certainly the case. That kind of hot pink color you see there over the Central Valley of California, maybe more of a magenta, that's excessive heat warnings. So those are getting pretty high up level of concern, I would say. So we're talking triple digits or even beyond for the Central Valley, the kind of darker red color in southeast California, the lower Colorado River Valley, southwest Arizona. Those are excessive heat watches. So growing concern for excessive heat out west. This orange color here is heat advisories. And the reasoning for that is that ridge that we just saw building into the area. Now, if we just look at this a different way, this is looking at the National Weather Service maximum temperature forecast for each day. And we'll just take this out over the next week. Here's today, Wednesday. Mentioned that trough over Nevada, over California, over Utah, keeping those temperatures cooler. That's consistent. So take this through Thursday. Temperatures warming up along the West Coast. I think really Friday, most folks will start to feel this as more dramatic warm up, certainly across the Central Valley. Saturday is going to be, I think, the big ticket a day for California in terms of heat. That's when I expect the highest temperature readings, as much as 15 degrees Fahrenheit above normal. And if you think about the date, I mean, we're at the end of June, so normal temperatures in California are quite hot anyway. When we add on anomalous temperature even beyond that, that's how we get into triple digits. That's how we're talking about potentially even 105 degrees Fahrenheit plus, getting toward that 110 degree level in California. That's getting pretty hot. And then some of that extending even up into Oregon and Washington. Now, not triple digits, but we're talking about upper 80s into the 90s even. For the desert Southwest, they can go quite a bit hotter than that. We think Arizona, southeastern California, we're talking triple digits up to potentially even 115 degrees Fahrenheit. So we'll be watching those temperatures there. Those are actually a little bit closer to normal, actually, for that area, at least geographically, relatively speaking, but still warm temperatures prompting those excessive heat watches. If we look at precipitation across the same time frame, I'll just quickly go through this. Not much of a story to be had here. Ridges, like I mentioned at the beginning, they tend to keep precipitation out. They tend to bring the heat in. That's the story certainly across the west over the next 7 days, at least looking at this European model forecast. I will say, as this ridge kind of builds in, I could see some storms developing maybe in far eastern Idaho, parts of Montana. You can see those depicted here, parts of Wyoming. And it's possible some of these could curl around the ridge, get into parts of Utah, or even eastern Arizona. We'll keep an eye on that, but nothing too significant at this time. If we want to take a look, let's say even beyond, let's get all the way out into Wednesday of next week, July 4th, now coming up here on Tuesday, and we'll try to give you a forecast a little bit beyond that. We did that last week, and we're able to kind of sense this heat risk coming around the bend. So we make this jet stream forecast valid as of Wednesday evening. There's the trough I mentioned affecting our weather today. As I make this forecast valid for Friday, getting into the weekend, there's that ridge developing out west. We discussed that. Get this into Wednesday, now July 5th of next week, and I'll take it one more day into Thursday. If I follow this fastest jet stream level winds across the west, and I'll trace it out with you here. Following these fastest winds, and if we kind of look at the shape here, that's more of a U or a valley. So now we have troughing potentially redeveloping across the west as early as mid next week, Thursday, July 6th. And that kind of leads me to believe we might be seeing more of a brief heat wave in California. If you remember, when we talked about the July forecast, kind of the extended forecast a bit earlier in June, we saw less of a chance of heat waves developing because we have that colder water off the west coast of the United States. So it wouldn't shock me if this is more of a brief heat wave, not one of these big concerning extended ones, which could become an implication or a concern for wildfires in the future. Take a look at the Climate Prediction Center, their opinion on that kind of 6 to 10 day window here. I mentioned the warmth is going to be kind of shifting up a little bit into Oregon and Washington. We're seeing that a little bit here in the 6 to 10 day window. This is looking out July 4th through the end of that next week now. But kind of critically here, if you look at California, much of the Central Valley, getting into Southern California, even the lower Colorado River Valley a bit, we're shifting back towards seasonal temperatures and perhaps even for the Southern California coastline, back toward that cooler than average temperature pattern that we've seen, unfortunately, for much of 2023. And so that leads me to believe seeing more of a temporary heat wave in California. If I take this out to the 8 to 14 day, so this is looking all the way out at the end of next week, even a bit beyond, very similar pattern here. If we jump over and look at precipitation, as that trough kind of redevelops in across the west, it could increase chances in this kind of axis here that we've talked about earlier in the year for some showers or thunderstorms during the daytime. I think Idaho, parts of Wyoming, Montana, they kind of stay in a favorable window for these kind of summertime thunderstorm activity, and we'll keep an eye on that in that long-range outlook. Now, I wanted to double back and look at the ECMWF. This is their 30-day extended July forecast, and they were trending kind of at the end of June here, warmer across the western U.S. So it's interesting to see us now seeing a real kind of material heat wave in that early forecast here. In parts of Central Valley, at least in this ECMWF is concerned, we do see some heat here. But also along the coastline, even the Southern California coastline, we see some cool patches here. I think there's some kind of offsetting, conflicting signals in this warmer temperature forecast. I could see us ending up maybe closer to average in parts of California, maybe slightly above in the Central Valley. I still think if we do have these heat waves, they'll be more temporary, just because of the tendency of the jet stream to want to flip back to that troughing into the West U.S. I think that's just going to be something we kind of continue to see throughout July. Now, it could be that as we get further into July, those heat waves become a little bit more bona fide, and instead of lasting on a Saturday through Sunday time period, we start to see them more toward a whole week, but just not seeing anything concrete like that. I'd expect the warmth to be shifted more into Washington and Oregon, and we're seeing some of that reflected here in that weekly, monthly outlook here through July. Unfortunately, rainfall is still kind of a non-story at this point. I would think kind of based on some of these forecasts that we've seen here, that this corridor in here could see above average precipitation, but otherwise across the western U.S., I expect dry conditions to continue to be a concern for parts of the Willamette Valley, parts of Washington, and going south of there, just not a rainy time anyway for parts of California and Nevada, so not expecting precip there. And then there's that weekend monsoon that we've really been expecting all year. As we get into July and August now, starting to get into the monsoon season, but that jet stream, that subtropical component of it at least, kind of lingering around the desert southwest, it doesn't really allow that low-level monsoonal circulation to get spun up, and that's going to delay or at least just wholesale weaken the monsoon here as we go through July, and we're seeing that reflected here in this European monthly forecast for July. I want to close the video here. We do have some activity in the far eastern Pacific in terms of tropical storms and hurricanes. In fact, just before I started recording this video, the National Hurricane Center just turned Tropical Storm Adrian into a proper hurricane now. You can see that signified here in their graphical outlook. Right behind it, really right on the heels, a potential Tropical Storm Beatrice. That would be the next one in the name list there, expected to develop behind it. Now, the good news here is these are expected to stay out in the Pacific Ocean. In fact, Adrian expected to perhaps strengthen a bit before quickly weakening as it heads toward the northwest, I'd expect probably a similar trajectory and development from Beatrice, although there has been some hints in the forecast that this could sneak a little bit closer to the coastline, could bring some rain and wind to parts of the western Mexican coastline. Neither of these expected to be a threat materially to the United States. In some cases, these kind of East Pacific hurricanes can swing back up through the continent and bring some moisture into the central part of the country, or at least the south central part like Texas. Not seeing anything like that right now. If we look at some of these forecasts for both of these storms here, I'll make this valid as a Wednesday evening. There's the Hurricane Adrian. You can notice it's quite a bit stronger than this potential developing tropical storm here, Beatrice, which would be named if it became strong enough. So take this through the forecast Wednesday, Friday, now into this weekend. Adrian shifting further into the Pacific and weakening, and then Beatrice just behind it doing the same but at a much closer trajectory to the Mexican coastline, which could bring some rain and wind into here. Now this is all the way out into Monday here of next week. If I take this much further beyond that, both of these weakening and pretty much becoming a non-entity as we get into next week now, July 6th. I think there's two reasons we're seeing some weakening here pretty quickly as these extend toward the northwest. One thing, hurricanes, tropical storms, they don't like wind shear. So we just take a look at the average wind shear over both of these storms. When we get into this kind of red color here, this is really not good wind shear for the development of tropical storms or hurricanes, so that is expected to weaken these to some degree as they head toward the northwest. The other one is more simple. Hurricanes, tropical storms, they feed on this very warm ocean water. We have plenty of it in the far eastern Pacific. We call it bath water at these temperatures here at 30 and 31 degrees Celsius, just off the southern coast of Mexico where these two are developing. But as they extend toward the northwest, it becomes a very different situation. This is not water you want to hang around in. This is much cooler. And that's that colder ocean water, at least relative to average, we've been talking about just off the southwest California coast. So as these want to get anywhere toward the northwest, we're expecting significant and rapid weakening, and we're seeing that in the forecast. That's all I have for you all this evening. Thank you for watching.